Hands up if you've ever set a boundary and then went back on your word. Or you set a boundary and then still took on too many commitments. Or you set a boundary and your people-pleasing tendencies crept in and you did it anyway. Hey there, welcome back to the Mind Your Boundaries podcast, episode number 21. I'm your host and boundary enthusiast, Jessica Miller, and I'm so happy you're here today because we are talking about boundary setbacks, the 7 main reasons why they happen, and how you recover and reclaim your time. Hands up if you've ever set a boundary and then went back on your word. Or you set a boundary and then still took on too many commitments. Or you set a boundary and your people-pleasing tendencies crept in and you did it anyway. I know in my people-pleasing days, I used to beat myself up on this. And I would go down the rabbit hole of like, why can't you just respect yourself? Why can't you just respect your time? Why can't you just say no? Well, today we're going to discuss that. I'm also going to share with you, I recently had a boundary setback. That's where I've been. At the end of February, I had a boundary setback. I'm going to confess to you what happened, come clean, and then share with you what I did to just rebound and get back on track. So it turns out, once I did some digging, there are 7 main reasons why we go back on the boundaries we set. Number 1, guilt over disappointing others. This is a fear of letting someone down, and it's going to be particularly strong if you are conditioned to put other people's needs ahead of your own. Number 2, fear of conflict. Many people dread that potential fear that conflict will arise if they set a boundary. This potential fear can lead them to avoid setting or maintaining the boundary altogether. And what they're doing is they're just trying to maintain peace, even at the expense of their own time, health, and well-being. Number 3, desire for approval. The need to be liked or approved of can make it so hard to say no. This can be incredibly challenging in professional or social settings where you look at it like, I feel like this is a path to success, acceptance, or accomplishment. Number 4, a lack of self-worth. Sometimes we don't see the value in ourselves, so enforcing a boundary is kind of difficult. And if you don't see yourself as worthy, it's easy for you to cave into other people's needs, requests, or demands. Number 5, unclear boundaries. Sometimes we're not even clear with ourselves. Like we think, I don't always need you to announce before you come over. Like sometimes I don't like unannounced guests, but sometimes it's okay. And if it's kind of ambiguous, sometimes you'll get upset with the person, sometimes you won't, then you'll direct it at yourself. So oftentimes we just have to get more clear on what we expect or what we want with our boundary. Number 6, habitual behavior. This is where if you are used to being a people pleaser, if you are used to taking on overcommitting yourself, or if you're used to being that person in your family that just gets it done, it's hard to break that habit. And so you have to be very, very conscientious and very aware as you are breaking that habit to give yourself a moment to really collect and then realize, oh wait, if I just accept this, I'm continuing the behavior that I want to change. And so kind of putting in a buffer before you accept any kind of invitation for a commitment is the key here. And number 7, misplaced responsibility. Sometimes we feel responsible for other people's happiness. And this could be due to our childhood where your mom or your parents, somebody kept telling you over and over and over, like, you make me happy. Like when you do this, this brings me happiness. And they might not even have verbally told you. You could have just internalized, oh wow, when I perform or achieve or do things for them, they're really happy. So I must be in charge of making them happy. And then you transfer that responsibility to other relationships as an adult. And that can get exhausting and lead to a lot of boundary setbacks. Remember in episode 1, I shared with you that I am a recovering people pleaser and I'm a workaholic. So I have set in place certain boundaries to make sure I live a life that's aligned with my values, which are being a present parent and making sure I am just making memories with my family. Ever so often though, a perfect storm will come up and I'll have a boundary setback. Usually what happens is I will overcommit to things. When I commit to something like on its own, like this own event, singular, it just feels like it's no big deal. And then I'll just say, yep, 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 yep. And then all of a sudden I'm holding all of this and it comes due at once. And I'm just like, oh, it's like a big tidal wave just comes and crashes into me. And that's what happened at the end of February. But I'm sure you can relate to this. It's so easy to say, oh, yeah, I can be the president of the PTA. It's one meeting once a month. Of course I can do that. Yes, Cheryl, I'll watch your adorable pug puppy while you go to Mexico. Of course, Aunt Susan, I will come over and help you sort the papers like on your desk. Yes, Dad, I'll take you to PTs as you like rehabilitate after your knee replacement. But when all of that lands on the same week that you have a big work project due, and you still have attention needed at home with your kids and family and all the other adult responsibilities that we have to do, it's a lot. In the middle of February, this is what happened. We had candle customers reaching out to me, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but just in case, and you're thinking, I thought you were a therapist. When the governor shut down everything for the pandemic,
Governor Tim Walz ordered Minnesotans to stay at home for 2 weeks.
This is the latest step to slow the spread of COVID-19 and give our hospitals a chance to prepare to treat the most at-risk patients.
We still needed to bring in money because we're self-employed, and I took a hobby of mine. I figured out how to sell candles on Instagram. It took off. 4 years later, my husband and I now run a candle company as well. In the middle of February, some candle customers were reaching out and they were asking me if I would do this 30-day self-care challenge that I did the previous year. I hadn't even thought of this challenge, and they're right. I had done it starting March 1st. So they were asking like, are you gonna do this again? It was so great. And of course, that people pleaser in me was like, well, you should do this for them. Like, they're asking for it, you should do this. And I just knew I couldn't do it because with a private practice, the candles, and now my podcast, I just don't have the capacity if I'm still going to live a life aligned with my values. So I just said, no, I'm not planning on it, but it's all pre-recorded, and I showed them where it is. So those were newer candle customers. Then we had an OG. We had an OG that was in the trenches with us 4 years ago when we needed people to be giving our family money. So she literally helped like feed our children and helped us pay our bills. And she was asking for this self-care challenge. And I did really good at first. I was like, oh, I wish I could, but I just don't have the bandwidth. I just can't do it. And she was bummed. She accepted it. And then the guilt. The guilt started rising up inside of me. And I thought to myself as the day went on, I can't believe you can't do this for her. She literally helped feed your children. This would be good for you too. You're kind of working a little too hard, and this would help you focus on self-care. All you have to do is go live every single day on Instagram for 30 days straight for 15 minutes. Just press the live button. You already have all the notes. You should really do this. You don't want to disappoint her. She's been your candle customer for 4 years. Yeah, of course. I opened back up my DMs and I'm like, hey, I changed my mind. I'm gonna do it. She, of course, gave me the validation I needed. Oh, yay, I'm so happy. Honestly, I feel sick right now even talking about it because it was so stressful. When it crashed into me, it just felt like I got this really bad sunburn, and even the slightest breeze of anyone asking anything of me, I was just like, no, like just go away from me. And I just shut down. Like, I'll give you an example. My mom, my sweet 78-year-old mom, asked me to help her send an email out to the government. So it's a very big deal. She's like, hey, will you jump on a FaceTime call with me and see what I'm doing wrong? In my head, I'm like, no, like don't, like it was just like she was touching a sunburn, and I'm like, no. It was a 3-minute task, but that's how overwhelmed I was because I just got pushed past my limit because I said yes to something I definitely should have said no to. Here's another thing that slapped me in the face. On the third day, so I already knew. So on the first day, I was like, oh no, what did I do? But on the third day, I was like, I am in deep trouble because I know I committed to this beast and I don't go back on my commitments, but this is more than I can handle. So it was a Sunday, and I was set to come here to record a live, and the self-care prompt was what I do on Sundays, which is I light a candle and I just reflect on where I'm spending my time to make sure I'm living a life aligned with my values. Like, am I being a present parent? Am I making memories with my family? How ironic. I already knew my son was coming home from my mom's because he had a fever. So he was traveling, 40 miles to get back home as I'm trying to rush out the door so that I don't even have to feel the guilt of not sitting with him on the couch because he doesn't feel good and I'm coming here to do a live. I knew I wanted to get out of the driveway before they got there. So I'm almost in my car and I look back, there's my mom's Buick pulling up the driveway and I'm like, God dang it. So here's my kid. He gets out and my son is a snuggle bug and he's just like, oh, Mom. And I'm just like, oh, buddy, I gotta go. I gotta go do this live, this free live for a few people. Because at that point, and really the only time, it was just like 1 to 2 people showing up live, which even that even also was just like, ugh, I can't believe I said yes to this. So I had to like rush past him and then come here and just be like, let's reflect. But I mean, I'm just as transparent because I was trying not to cry the entire video, just telling them I give myself a D, I'm doing terrible. So it's not like I got on there and lied. I was very honest, but that happened as well. But as you can see, my people-pleasing side came up. I didn't want to disappoint her. I wanted to have her approval. So out of the 7 main reasons why we have our setbacks, for me, I struggle with the guilt of disappointing other people. And that comes from really deep. Like my dad was really good at making us feel like bad if he didn't get his way. He was so good at manipulation. And so that guilt is strong and I have done a lot of work around it, but that's number 1. And number 2 is seeking approval from other people. Back in my peak people-pleasing days, when I would go back on a boundary that I set, I would beat myself up for days and I would just keep belittling myself. But this time it was different. I was kinder to myself. I rebounded quickly. I had a plan set in place to get back on track within 5 days. I still felt like I had a sunburn because it was still a lot, but I definitely handled it differently. And so I wrote down what I did, and that's what I'm going to share with you, because you might be in a boundary setback right now, or you might often find that these 7 areas that do lead, or the reasons that lead to our setbacks, come up for you often. Hopefully these strategies help you as much as they helped me. Number 1, I acknowledge my disappointment, but I also acknowledge my progress, because both exist, and what this did is it stopped my spiral. Number 2, I talk to myself like I would talk to my 78-year-old sweet mother, and you could talk to yourself like you talk to your mom or talk to someone you love. Number 3, talk to a trusted confidant. So I talk to my husband because I'm so close to the picture that sometimes our emotions, and we're just so close that we can't see a solution, and they can. And he did, and I'll share that with you in just a second. Number 4, implement the solution. This might be like communicating with your mother-in-law that even though I know I said I need you to announce when you're coming over, and then I kind of went back on that a few times, I really do appreciate a call or text before you just stop over. This might be telling your sibling, I know you just put this on me, I'm going to give this task back to you, because maybe you are that person in your family that just gets it done. Maybe a coworker tends to pass their work on to you and you allowed it to happen yet again, and now you've decided, you know what? I'm giving this back. Or maybe after you've talked it over, you realize, nope, I just got to get through it. That was my case. I just had to get through it. As you get through it, you give yourself extra self-care. And number 5, going forward, you remember that isolated or singular small tasks are super harmless when they're just one thing at a time. What happens is when they all land on you at once, that's when the big tidal wave can just crash into you and give you a big boundary setback. So this is how it worked out for me. Number 1, I acknowledged my disappointment, but I acknowledged my progress as well. Right away I noticed, oh my gosh, I am not spiraling. Like I said, years before, I would have gone down the rabbit hole of belittling myself, but I knew right away my heart was in the right spot. Like this OG candle customer was asking for this and I didn't want to disappoint her. Number 2, I was so gracious with myself. I truly did talk to myself like I would talk to my 78-year-old mom. I told myself like, hey, you don't go live every day. You forgot that it takes hours of rehearsal. You don't just press the live button and then like, boom, you're on. Like, it's not your job. And so I was really kind to myself, which really helped boost my mood and just get me through it. So tip number 3, talk to a trusted confidant. So when I talked to my husband on day 5, I was a mess. Nobody was showing up on the live. So at 10 a.m. every single day, I would show up live for my mom and my mother-in-law. And I'm like, hey gang. And I would do it. So I was really frustrated. I feel like I was wasting my time. He said, Jess, everyone's watching the replay anyway. Why don't you just pre-record it and then just release it at 10 a.m. So number 4, that's what I did. I took action that Sunday. I pre-recorded up to like day 25 and then finished the rest on another day. It took a total of maybe 10 hours. And I got it done. Let me tell you, on March 30th, did I have a drink? I was so excited that it was finished, it was done. Number 5, I wrote myself a note and I have a reminder set for February of 2025. Under no circumstances do you do the self-care challenge again. So here is a couple scripts in case you do have to remind your mother-in-law about your boundary for unannounced guests. You can say, hey Judith, the other day when you stopped over unannounced, I just wanted to remind you that I do like to have a routine with the kids and a structure to my day. So I do need you to call before you just come over. Like a coworker giving you their work. Hey Frank, I'm swamped and it looks like I won't have time to review your numbers. Have you asked Danny? You give it back to him. So let's say you have an aging parent and you have siblings that just kind of pass everything off to you. I would call and just say, hey Nancy, I know you want me to take mom to her eye appointment. I've already asked for all my PTO off. I'm gonna have to hand this back to you. But let's say you're like me. You can't give it back. You have to knock it out. You need to think of people who can help support you while you work through the tidal wave. So talk to people, tell them, okay guys, I know I've overcommitted, I know I've done this before, but I'm really trying to make changes, and this is how you could support me as I'm trying to work through this task or work through all these commitments at this time. I hope this was helpful. I hope now you have a better understanding of the 7 main reasons as to why we have these setbacks. I know it was helpful for me to just be able to identify, like, yeah, the guilt of disappointment. And that guilt for me, again, comes from my dad. He was a master at it. And the other thing is it's not only the guilt, but the approval. I want the approval. I want to be liked by others. Those are my weak spots. Like, what are yours? Out of the 7 main reasons that typically cause us to have a boundary setback, what are yours? And then hopefully what I discovered in terms of what helped me rebound and then get back on track to reclaim my time helps you. Have a wonderful day, and until we meet again, make sure you mind your boundaries.